What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Called podcast. This is episode 2, and today I have a past SM from Egypt, Ronnie Anderson. Ronnie, would you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I mean, kind of already did. My name is Ronnie Anderson, and last year I was a student missionary in Cairo, Egypt, at a high school there called Nile Union Academy.
Awesome. And what did you do there?
I was mainly the boys' dean. That was my main position. But I also, as an SM, you do a lot of jobs. So I also taught government and geography. I was the assistant Pathfinder director for a couple weeks. I taught English to the community. And there's just a lot of jobs. Oh, I was also the worship coordinator for the church there. So
That is a lot. Did
Yeah.
you initially know that you were gonna do all those things when you got there, or what exactly did you sign up for, like when you were, applying and everything like that?
Yeah, so I had a hint that I might be doing some other stuff besides just deaning. But I definitely didn't know that I would be doing all that. I signed up for the boys dean position or assistant boys dean position. Um, and that was that. And I got there and they were like, oh yeah, by the way, you're teaching class tomorrow. Here's your book and lesson planning. And then they also had heard I was a music major. That's what I'm doing here, music education, Walla Walla. And they'd heard I was a music major, and so they're like, "Oh, by the way, we also voted you as the music chair for our church here." And I was like, "Oh, that's new. I have to learn how to lead music in a couple days."
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
crazy.
the classes just, they happened.
Hmm. Yeah.
It was difficult,
Yeah,
but
no, for sure. I know a lot of SMs, they sign up for one thing and, once they get there,
mhm.
they are at least offered some other stuff or just completely different position. But that sounds like you had a lot on your plate. What did your week look like as far as with all those different things that you had going on?
Oh boy, they were busy. So we had 3 deans. We were blessed. The year before, one of my other friends was there as a boys dean. He was the pretty much the only dean. It was him and one other person that really didn't do very well. But we were blessed to have 3 people there that did the job. So we basically worked a morning shift from 6 to like 4, and then the other person would come in from 4 to 11 and close it out, and the third person would have that day off. So like every 3 days we had a day off, which was pretty nice. I still had to teach and do all those sorts of things. But I ended up having to. I said I was the Pathfinder assistant director for a couple weeks, and that's because I ended up having to say no to that. It was too
Mm,
much, and it did with my deaning schedule, and I had a lesson plan for classes at some point.
yeah.
So I eventually had to say no to that, and that wasn't a happy time. But they understood. They understood
Yeah.
when you're overloaded. So I think that was an important thing for me. But it was that. So it was deaning 2 days a week, and I'd go. I'd sit in my office most of the day. I would go teach my 1 hour class, and then come back and sit in the office and answer questions, hand out gate passes, just talk to the kids, see how they're doing. Yeah, it was that. And then on Friday nights, I did Vespers usually. And then music for church on Sabbath, and Sundays was the relaxing day. So
That's so packed, man. That's
yeah,
crazy.
it was
And
busy.
I mean, and yeah, and they wanted to load you up with even more. I know it's super hard. Like when you're there, it's so easy to say yes to all these things, because you want to be pleasing to people there, especially because it's not really like your home or anything like that. So and the people are, they're accommodating to you. So it's definitely super easy to say yes. So I mean, like that's good that you're able to say no. I don't know. I don't know how many other people would have been able to do that, but at the same time, like you got honestly, at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do, especially with that
Yeah.
many things on your plate. That can be definitely challenging to do that type of thing. But sorry, I kind of skipped over this. But what exactly kind of drew you to go to Egypt? I know that's like a position or a location that I don't think a lot of people go to, especially from Wall Wall. So it's definitely interesting. I know a couple, but what drew you to go there?
So I was initially going to be a boys dean. Well, I wanted to. Okay, so when I was looking into being an SM, I wanted to be a boys dean. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I didn't necessarily want to go teach. It makes me nervous to teach. I didn't like being up front all that much. Um, so I wanted to be a boys dean, and there were really only 2 positions. There was Egypt and there was Hawaii. And by the
Mm,
time I got my application and everything done and my recommendations in, Hawaii was filled up. It was kind of a blessing because I don't think I would have been, as much of what I was looking for in Hawaii. it would have been certainly been a nice place. I've never been there, but
Yeah, yeah,
it's quite a contrast, Hawaii and then Egypt.
yeah, for sure.
But oh, now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, how did I? Okay, so it was pretty much a God thing, honestly. I mean, I feel like everybody says that, but it's kind of what it is, So I
Hmm.
was about Hawaii. I was like, okay, maybe this is it. Like God, tell me if it's not.
Yeah.
And Egypt was the one that worked out, and it was so smooth. Everything was so smooth. And I mean, it's the Middle East, so it's it can be sketchy at times to go to, like travel papers and all these sorts of things you have to
Hmm.
get with government over there, and the visas and everything, and everything went so smoothly. The principal, Mr. Lowell, that hired me, interviewed me, and loved me, and it's just a lot of things worked very, very smoothly.
Hmm.
But the main reason I went to Egypt, or the main reason I went as an SM, of course, there's always the things you hear SMs come back and say, oh, it was because I wanted a better relationship with God, and that was definitely part of it. Um, and but a lot of it was just I was really itching to serve. College can kind of I didn't feel like I was doing anything. I'm just going through classes. I'm doing my normal day-to-day routine, and there's all these people around the world that are suffering so much more than me and could need to hear God's message more than more than I need to study
Yeah.
theology or something. Like, why am I sitting here doing this when I could be helping so many people? And so that was a big reason. And the other one was um, I've kind of grown up in this bubble, not necessarily an Adventist bubble, but it's just
Hmm.
this bubble of everybody that knows me and it knows what they expect me to be. And I wanted to see who I was outside of that bubble. And so,
Mm.
you know, change would my personality change, my character change if I was thrown outside of that to just be on my own. So that was another big part of choice me as
That's super cool. That is super cool. I know, like, I feel like all SMs have a different reason to SM, and all reasons are valid, I think, when it comes down to it. But that's super cool that you were able to acknowledge that you wanted to see a difference in, just in your environment and see how that would affect you. And that's super cool to just know that you wanted to grow more individually, which SMing, obviously gives you the opportunity to grow in so many different ways. And just kind of going off of that, where do you think you saw yourself grow the most throughout your year?
a lot of it, I dealt with a lot of people, so probably honestly
Mm,
patience and like problem solving.
yeah.
Um, because like Middle Eastern culture, Egyptian culture is quite different from ours. Many of the things that are okay there are not okay where we come from.
Hmm.
Um, and so trying to reason with the boys and the girls there, reason through things instead of just having emotional responses and like trying to give them the reasons why consequences happen sometimes to us, um, was really good. And it made me really articulate, why these consequences or punishments were happening to them.
Right.
Um, and they're pretty persistent, so it made me be very, very patient. Um, so that was a big thing where I saw myself grow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially in all the different roles you're experiencing with different people, and you said like different cultures. What was like? Could you give us an example of probably like one of the biggest like cultural differences between here and over there? I know you kind of touched on that a little bit, but just if you could give us an example of that.
Yeah, so there's two main ones that I always bring up with people, and one of them is I don't want to sound like I'm putting down their culture. It's a fine culture, and it's certainly old, much older than where we come from. But there's two things that I usually find that are difficult differences to understand for us.
Hmm.
One of them is lying is considered okay.
Mm,
So young men there, it's still very much a patriarchal society. Young men there basically can do no wrong in their mother or their father's eyes, and so
mm,
if they can come up with a good enough excuse, they can get their own way. They can get their way no matter what, and they learn this from a very young age. And so you see these little 5-year-old boys manipulating their mothers into giving them whatever they want, and so they learn that that's okay. And so when they come to our high school, which is an American high school run by mainly South American and North American staff, our values are quite different. And so, lying is considered not a good thing, but when they do it to
Mm-hmm.
you, they have consequences. But since they've been taught that that's okay, they don't necessarily make the connection of like, why is there a consequence for this? Like, this is okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one. And the other one is they solve arguments by physically fighting. Like, that's how they do it. Um, if somebody bumps you in traffic, and traffic is a whole nother deal, but if somebody bumps you in traffic and you think it's their fault, you're going to park your car and you're going to get out and you're going to go fight them or go yell at them or
Wow.
something. It can be as trivial as cutting someone in line, and they'll have a physical fight over it. That was something that I didn't really think existed anymore, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It was something I went there and I was like, that's still a thing. Like, there's so many more better ways of overcoming this, but that's how they solve their differences. And so teaching them to think through things before they just act on their emotions was a big part of our job there. But those are two examples, and it sounds like I'm bashing their culture. I'm certainly not,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something that I had to struggle with and kind of reason through in my head and get used to.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that would certainly be difficult, especially from the position that you're in, which is like being a dean, and you're kind of responsible for them, responsible for their actions, and responsible for the consequences of their actions. So
Yeah.
how would you? Because I mean that's completely different from what we're used to here. We're usually more try to be a little bit more civil, and we try not to fight. And lying, like you said, over there is not as frowned upon as it is here. So how would you kind of like articulate that to them, that they couldn't really get away with that type of stuff? And was there any system that kind of worked to kind of implement that kind of idea to those kids there?
It was definitely a slow process implementing it. We went through a couple different systems. At first, it was just well, we started out with a strike system, I guess, and that's kind of what we stuck to, but we changed it as we went. So at first, maybe we did room checks to make sure their rooms were clean, and if we saw bad behavior, we'd probably talk to them about it. If it was bad enough, we'd probably go to administration. It was
Mm-hmm.
taken pretty seriously, especially the fighting aspect. The lying, we could handle in the dorm, but if there
Yeah.
was a fight, it was pretty much administration's call to handle. Unless it was in the dorm, that was our territory. Um, I had an added advantage. The head dean, who was Portuguese, he was a Portuguese police officer, and so he was used
Oh,
to dealing
okay.
with all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so having him like to back us up if the
Mm-hmm.
kids gave us problems, being the younger assistant deans, because some of the kids were older than me. They didn't know that, but having him above us to kind of back us up was really useful. But the strike system, so if they were late somewhere, or they just didn't clean their room one day, or they, I don't know, pick your poison, they would get a strike. And if you got to 3 strikes, you wouldn't have gate passes for a week. And if you got to 6 strikes, you wouldn't have gate passes for 2 weeks. If you got to like 9 strikes, we'd like call your parents and be like, "Hey, this is a
Mm.
problem. What can you do to help us?" Um, and then 15, I think, was when they would send them home. And I think we never had a kid get to 15. They certainly got to 6 and 7 and 8 and 9.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, the ones that like to push the boundaries. Most kids were good with it. They understood it.
Yeah.
There were a few problem children that we had to keep reinforcing it with, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it's just it's hard for them to learn these things because they are coming in from their home village where none of this is talked about. It's all
Mm-hmm.
their Asian culture, and then they come to a Western school and they expect it to be the same, and it's definitely
Yeah.
not. So there's that balance of being firm, but and like holding your line, but at the same time understanding where the kids come from.
Right.
So the strike system worked really well for that, and that was the main way we did it. A lot of it was just joking with them, and then if they did it again, we'd be a little more serious with them.
Right.
We worked with each kid as we could. Certainly
Mm-hmm.
work all the time, but
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that's good. I mean, like you said that correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that no one was sent home, right? No one reached those 15 strikes, I think it was,
Not
to be able to send home. Okay,
we
that's,
certainly
I
sent
mean, that's,
home, but it was from the strikes.
yeah. Okay, got you. I see. So what was if you have any crazy experiences, what was like the craziest experience that you witnessed over there? Because I know I've heard some interesting stories from past SMs from Egypt. So I'm curious to see what you experienced over there, if there was anything wild like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much I should say. I don't scare people away, but the craziest I can think of is, well, okay, there's two. I'll go with two. Bad habit the kids have is they don't like the calf food, much like we don't like calf food sometimes here. So that's a similarity we share.
Yeah.
But they didn't like the calf food, so they just wouldn't eat. And it's 110 degrees outside. They wouldn't drink water. They wouldn't eat. And then they faint. And
Mm,
so they'd faint, and then everybody would freak out because they fainted. They're dying. They have to go to the doctor immediately. So they'd go to the doctor, and then the doctor would give them a shot of sugar or glucose or something that would give them energy, and then they would come back and they'd be, oh, there's a miracle, they're all saved. And that happened when it was hot outside. That happened on the daily. That was it's a normal occurrence. They're like, oh, he fainted again. They're like, oh, let's take him to the doctor. So that was a crazy experience. The craziest one that I can think of happened maybe the second month I was there. Back to the whole fighting thing, and there's some tensions between different cultures over there in Africa that it's been happening for thousands of years. It's very, very old feuds, and so we have kids from both ethnicities at the school, and most of them get along very well, but there's some that are a little more aggravating towards others. And it happened during a soccer game. One of the refs made a bad call, or the kid thought it was a bad call, and so he
mhm.
went over to the ref and started explaining, and the ref grabbed him by the throat, and the refs were kids. The ref grabbed him by the throat and shoved him away, and then that just a brawl ensued, right? So
Yeah, I
every
would.
kid harboring any sort of bad feeling just decided, now's my chance, and
That's
so I can
crazy.
just go punch whoever I want. So literally an all school brawl. Um,
That's insane.
we separated them as much as we could. We basically just um, shoved them all into the dorms, locked the doors, and shoved them all into their rooms, and then went and
Yeah,
went, okay, what's going on?
yeah.
Um, I can't do it justice by just talking about it, but it was a time. It took probably a whole evening to calm down, and after that,
That's wild.
several kids were suspended and a couple were sent home. And it is what it is. It's high school. It's a whole different culture. So
Hmm.
it was certainly a new experience for me. But
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure because you said you had friends that had gone there before. Did they tell you about these stories as well, or was this all like fresh and new to you?
they'd warned me that fighting was how they solved things over there. But I was like, oh,
Mhm.
it can't be that. It can't be like that bad.
Yeah.
Um, and then I went there and was like, oh, so this is legit. This is how it
Like, oh,
happens.
sorry, it's pretty bad. It's pretty
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
That's funny.
After that, though, it was like a month and a half into school. I came a little late anyway, so it was more like 2 months into school when that happened. But after that, a couple kids were sent home that were the main instigators of everything, and it calmed down after that. Most kids are
Hmm.
they just want to be there and they just want to go to school and do their stuff. But some
Yeah.
other kids are there for different reasons, and sometimes you have to send them home for the betterment of the whole school. So
Right.
luckily,
Dang.
that was the that was the most crazy thing we had.
Yeah. That's a lot though, especially with all that. I would assume that you'd have so much stress just from all the roles, and then on top of that, the job description itself seems like it's very, very stressful. How would you kind of manage all that, and like what would you do to kind of just relax, just chill, and just kind of get into the a good mentality to be in, so you could perform and do all those duties and responsibilities.
Yeah, that was definitely something I had to learn. Came with time is how to make time for myself and relax in a very short time span.
Hmm.
So if I worked a morning shift, I got off at 4, so I ended up the second half of the year I ended up working out or going and playing basketball with kids in the evenings. And if I wasn't on duty, it was much more of like a friend role.
Mm.
I could become their friend and really get to know them a little more. They loved basketball. They're terrible at it, but they loved it. Soccer was they would destroy me. But they're really good. Some of the other kids like basketball and they'd come play with me. Um, but I'd go do that. I started working out halfway through the year, and just to be able to kind of let off some steam was a really good thing. So it wouldn't come out on my kids. I told a story
Hmm.
during this where I wasn't managing my emotions enough, and actually ended up pushing a kid. And
Mm.
luckily everything was okay. I apologized, and the kid understood, but I had to learn how to do that. And a lot of it was just um, music is a big haven for me. It's part of the reason I'm a music major. And so I would come home and I just listen to music, and journaling was another way of letting out that sort of thing and relaxing, and just recounting, all the good things that had happened as well. Um, yeah, those were the main ways. If I worked an evening shift, I would just spend the morning doing that instead, trying to relax and get everything ready for the day. And then the evening would be the crazy time in the dorm. So
Yeah, I bet.
yeah, that was
All
the
right.
main.
Well, I mean, yeah, those are all
Mm.
good stuff. What was kind of like your favorite thing, like maybe about your job itself that also kind of let you like treasure those moments? You know what I mean? Like I know there's so many things that go on throughout the year that you could say like, oh, this was hard, or this was difficult. But what was one or two or a couple things, that you were able to find almost peace within those moments, if you have any like that?
Yeah, um, a lot of my favorite part of my job was sitting in the deaning office. So I don't remember if anybody knows what the dorm looks like, or if I showed pictures of it at Vespers, but it's basically an L shape, and you walk in, and then on the left is the dean's office, and then on the right is the hallway. So you're sitting in the dean's office, you can look straight down the hallway all the way to all the rooms. And so every kid has to walk by you as they come in the dorm.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they always check to see if you're there. And if you're not, they're going to be a little crazier. But they'll wave to you and say hi. A lot of them, I had at least 4 or 5 that would come sit in there daily and just talk to me. They'd ask me like, so why don't you think fighting's okay? Or like, why do
Mm.
we have streaks? All these sorts of things that they genuinely were trying to understand. But that was one of my favorite times, and they would generally be a little more vulnerable with me
Hmm.
if it was just us sitting in the office. They taught me about their struggles, what girls they were going to go try to date or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
they had to be careful about that because it's a different culture.
Hmm.
But
Right, right.
that, that was probably the favorite part of my job. I did enjoy doing music with them as well. Um, Taught myself how to play guitar so I could lead music better. Now, sitting in the dean's office, and after we'd have a dorm worship every night, and after dorm worship, just joking around with them,
Hmm.
to him about maybe something that I'd said during the worship, something that I'd seen during the day. Or, I don't know. That was a good time.
Yeah. No, that's awesome because it sounds like the hardest part of your job was also one of your favorite parts, like
Yeah,
managing the kids. Like it may have been difficult and it may have been the hardest part, but at the same time that was the part that you loved the most. And I think that's
yeah,
super important for people that are, thinking about SMing. Like you hear there's so many bad things that you can hear about it, but in those
mm,
bad things you can also find the things that people love about it. And I
yeah,
think your story kind of like highlights that as well. So that's super awesome.
yeah.
You talked about how, culture again is a little different. What was like the biggest culture shock to you when you were there during your time there?
Um, I don't know, honestly. Um, there wasn't a lot of culture shock that I felt. I wasn't necessarily prepared for it. It was very different than I was used to, but I didn't feel out of place.
Mm.
They're While they do things differently than us, they're still very caring and community oriented. So And especially since I was a Westerner, I walk out the compound and immediately everyone knew I was the American. I'm a little darker than some of my other friends, but um, we had a girl there named Erin, and she's 5'6", blonde hair, blue eyes, and immediately knew she was the American. But so, but they're protective of you as a foreigner, even though they like you because you're an American. They're going to be very protective, and they genuinely want to get to know you. Even if they can't, a lot of the older generation can't speak English very well. A lot of the kids can, because it's now being taught in their schools. But um, they would still be interested in getting to know you and things like that. So I don't know that there was a lot of culture shock necessarily. Maybe the things I talked about earlier, like how they handled their disagreements, was a little bit shocking, and the um, how much they actually do lie to you, because my friend who'd been there previously had told me they lie to you a lot. You need to basically assume that they're lying to you all the
Wow.
time. That's a horrible. You feel horrible.
Yeah.
If a kid tells you something, you don't want to be automatically like, you're lying to me right now. But it's kind of how it was.
Yeah.
And so maybe those two things were the biggest. I don't mean to keep going back to them, but I can't really think of anything else that's different.
No, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, I mean that in itself is, I mean that would shock me for sure. You kind of talked about how they were very protective of you, and that was kind of, I would assume that was kind of a way to like kind of your support system in a way. Was there any support, let's say from like back home, that was able to alleviate some of the stresses that you were going through throughout the day, and just kind of how that all played out?
Yeah. So when I first got there, I was, I walked in the door and immediately went, "What have I done?" But the first couple weeks were probably the most difficult for me. Usually, homesickness sets in a couple months later. Luckily, I didn't really get homesick. Maybe for a couple days, but the first few days were hard because I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anyone.
Right.
Right. You're making new friends, and a lot of them don't speak English very well. Like I said, we had a lot of South Americans, Brazilians, and Argentinians there, whose English is good but not the best, and so I couldn't just converse with them. Aaron was the only other American, and Mr. Wolf, I guess. But once again, I didn't know them at all. And so the first few weeks of finding the people that I really connected with and stuff, that was probably a hard thing. But luckily, my parents and I had a couple friends that texted me or called me every couple of days. Egypt's 9 hours ahead, so we had to plan the times pretty well, pretty carefully. Yeah, as it is with every SM position. But that was good. And then as the time progressed, it kind of shifted away from texting my mom or my dad every day or my friends every day to relying on the people that were there in Egypt with me. I got to be really close with several of the Brazilians and just lots of the people there. And I knew I could rely on them and really, rely on them. For, if we were struggling together, we'd struggle together. And I knew I could go rant to them if I needed to. And they knew they could come, cry on my shoulder if I needed to or anything like that. And so the support system definitely shifted. A big thing that I didn't realize would be such a huge thing to me was the SM packages. Honestly, getting those things and just reading the notes, even people I didn't know, it just like reaffirmed me so much. I was gonna come back, and if COVID hadn't happened, I was hopefully gonna write more notes to SMs that were going out this year. Because for me that was a huge thing. I didn't realize, when I was a freshman, sophomore, I didn't realize how much those notes meant to SMs. Until I got out there and received those things. But those packages were really nice. And then my mom came to visit during Christmas, so that was a nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, no, those notes, I know for me, like same thing. You don't really think about how much of an impact they'll have on you. But honestly, I think I kept all of them, and I still have them like at home, and I just kind of and I kind of just read through them every now and then. But yeah, I mean, it's also good to know that, like you said, like relying on the people that you have around you is very important. I think while during your year, I know it's super easy to when you're having a difficult time, you kind of want to just like shut it all out and kind of maybe phone home or text whatever, whoever, just away from the situation. But honestly, like the people that you're with, like you said, those are the people that they're going through probably the same struggles that you are. And so like that, you build that bond, I think. And I think it's just that you don't really realize that your support system is also right in front of you during your year. So that's super awesome. What is one thing that you took away from your SM experience that you have been able to put into practice now that you're away from the mission field, now that you're back home?
This was a tough one. I don't know that I have a complete answer to it. I think I look at the world differently, the world as a whole. I see it much more as a conglomerate of like different cultures and different people that we all want the same thing. We all want happiness, but it's different ways of finding it. So I guess being a little more mindful of people around me would be the thing, because now I'd been outside of my hometown and where I grew up for 21 years, for 7 months, and I hadn't seen the one person I knew was my mom when she came halfway through for a week, so it's I guess looking at the world differently and like really taking the time to care and connect with everybody that I came in contact with. So I think that's been an important takeaway and something that I've tried to apply coming home.
Yeah, no, I mean that that's powerful in itself. I mean, when you go out, especially in your location, it seemed like you were, you said there was one other American, so it's like everyone else is just so different from you, and you really have no option basically but to like immerse yourself into the culture itself, into the people that you're around, and so getting that perspective on the world, on people in general, that's something I think that almost every SM like brings back with them, but at the same time, it's not something to be diminished. Like that's very important in itself. So that's super cool that you're able to have that and bring that back with you. Now I'm losing my train of thought.
It is what it is.
No, but now that you're back, and you're kind of away from the line and the fighting, how has it been difficult to kind of come back into the real world in a sense, or how's that been for you, your re-entry back into back home?
It wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. There wasn't like a reverse culture shock that I can remember. Part of that might have been the easier, like slower reintroduction into society that I had because of COVID. I did have to come home early, middle of March, with a lot of other SMs, and so I came home and then I was quarantined for 3 months and really didn't see a lot of people, which was hard enough in itself. A lot of Zoom calls and Teams calls and whatnot. Luckily for me, Camp Maibaden ran, and so I was able to go back there, and that was a great outlet because we were all feeling the same thing. I think 4 or 5 SMs worked at Maibaden from different places, Ali Stonis and other people, and we were all able to really connect and kind of like debrief about our years there, and so that was nice. And camp is a whole different culture. It's like a little culture within the Northwest culture, wherever your camp is, because you're so secluded from everywhere. But that was really nice. And then coming back to Walla Walla was definitely a shift. That might have been the hardest transition, after camp, and then coming back to what we didn't know we were going to come back to until like a week.
Yeah, for sure.
So that might have been the hardest transition. But aside from like talking about culture shock, there wasn't really a lot that I experienced. Certainly my bowels experienced a culture shock. Coming back to American food was quite different than what I'd been eating for 7 months. So
yeah,
that was different for sure. I don't know if that was appropriate to say, but
no, you're good. It is what it is. It is what it is.
It's been said. I can take it back now. But yeah, it was, there's a lot of the same values across the cultures that I looked for and appreciated in their culture that I appreciate more in ours now. So yeah, for me, there wasn't really a lot. And it's kind of a weird thing to say because I
Yeah.
thought there was going to be, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had a very similar experience, I think, and I think, like you said, COVID kind of helped almost in a way, which sounds super weird, but like, because everyone was already locked inside and no one would see each other anyway, it was like, I don't know. It was almost, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, but for some reason, like just being at home and not seeing the world, I guess, in a sense, kind of did help kind of that slow reentry process. And like you said, I know a lot of people, work at camp or something after they SM or before they SM, because it's a super good way to just kind of reconnect with people and, just kind of, you're still serving in a way. And so that's like a super good recommendation for people to do. Is there anything that you would, specifically for your location, is there anything that you would tell someone if they were thinking about going, either what you would have wanted to know before going, to kind of help ease their entry into the SM experience?
Maybe make connections as soon as you can, like with the other staff there. Find people that you know you can rely on, and rely on them.
Yeah.
You know, the tendency is, and I think it's the same across the board as an SM, is the tendency is to stay back home. You want to stay connected to all your friends and your parents, and that you want that to be your support system. But like I talked about earlier, having the people in where I was, that we could share experiences and we could really support each other through that was really important. So I think that would be something, like make connections and find those people that you can rely on as soon as you can when you get to your location.
Awesome. That's perfect. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate the time that you've been able to give us, and especially for a location such as Egypt. I know not a lot of people go, like I said before, so not a lot of information is out there. So I hope that a lot of people will find this useful if they are thinking about going. And would you mind if? Go for it.
I will say, Egypt is not for everyone. It's certainly a unique mission field.
Yeah.
I make it sound pretty nice, but it definitely was. There were times where I was thinking about coming on. And I think, a lot of people could say that as an SM, but you really have to know what you believe. You have to know what your character is and your values are. And it's a whole different world over there, as it is in the islands where you were. So I don't know, but it's the thing that's great about being an SM is anybody can serve. You don't need a degree. You don't need anything like that. Just being an SM, and sometimes I said this in my worship talk, going over just for one person. I was like, God, if it can help one person, that's worth it. Let me know that I help one person. So, knowing that anybody can go serve, and serving is a way to fill you up, fill your heart up. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's important to know. Like you said, like each call is not for everyone. I mean, at the end of the day, like some calls will be more difficult than others. But at the same time, like you said, if anyone can do it, and if you're called, like definitely look into it. There's that saying, God calls the called, not the qualified. And that's kind of why we called this podcast The Called, because we are all the called, but we are not all necessarily the qualified. And so that's super important to know when choosing your locations, and the positions that, it might not be for you, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean that there isn't something for you. But at the same time, all these locations, there's something that you can give to them, and I promise you that there's something that they can give to you as well.
100%.
Yeah. But awesome, man. Thank you. I appreciate your time. If people want to know more about Egypt and the location, would you be down to talk to them if they were to DM you or something like that?
Yeah, I love talking about it. Email me, call me, text me, Instagram, whatever. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll be sure to link your Instagram on the post. Well, anyway, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I appreciate you for being here, and I'm excited that we're both able to have experiences that we can talk about now, and hopefully, someone will find this information useful.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have anything left to say, you can go ahead and say it now. But if not, we can just go ahead and close the episode. Awesome. Sounds good. All right, guys. Well, be sure to tune into next week's episode. And again, just thanks so much for your time, man. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll catch you guys next time.